Hello, everybody, and welcome to WordCast number 78. Once again, got the number right this time. So every time I got to be a little happier about that until I make a mistake again. So
I don't think you mentioned it last episode.
I might not have if I didn't. You guys should yell at me in the comments down below. I think that's a good idea. So thank you, everybody that's joining us, though. And obviously, we've got Mr. Daniel, or whatever his name is here. Hello,
I'm
Daniel.
Mr. Daniel now. I expect everyone to call me that for the rest of their lives.
That's your name, Mr. Daniel? I kind of like it.
I don't.
Oh, all right. Well, I'm going to call you that then. So we've got a pretty good podcast for you guys coming today, and we may actually end up having one later this week about some other stuff, so stay tuned for that. And this week we are going over, of course, Samsung's Unpacked event, going over all the Galaxy news and fun stuff that's happening, including the terrible prices. And then we've got some stuff about Apple's App Store policies and also some interesting news about AMD. So should be a relatively good week.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Very yes. So
go ahead and jump right into it, as Philip Franco would say.
What if I want to sit right into it?
He doesn't say that, so I don't know.
Can I say that?
If you want that to be your thing from now on, I'm gonna sit right into it.
I'm gonna sit right on it. I'm gonna sit on your face. Wait, sorry, that got really weird too quick.
And demonetized.
Hey, whatever. No big deal.
What a stupid joke to get demonetized over, though.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Yeah, but you know what? I'm okay with it. So, hello everybody once again, and we've got the Galaxy Note 20. You okay there, Daniel?
Sure, your mom this episode.
Mr. Daniel. So, we've got the Galaxy Note 20. That's the thing I'll start with first. The Note 20 and the Note 20 Ultra. And I'm actually very disappointed on a lot of fronts here. I expected a lot better from Samsung. So I'm going to start with... Why? I guess that's a good point. Yeah. Okay, so anyway, so we'll start with the Note 20, which is the bigger disappointment here, in my opinion. So it's a $1,000 phone, which is not unprecedented, obviously, for the Note series. However... if we're comparing it to the standard S20 lineup, it does have a worse camera, so that's already kind of bad. It does have the S Pen, but the S Pen is not as good as the S Pen in the Ultra, which we'll get to in a bit. But it's got better latency than the S Pen from the previous Notes, but not as good as the Ultra. It's made out of plastic. Yeah, you heard me right. It's a $1,000 phone. It's made out of plastic and has a 1080p 60 hertz display. Right off the bat there, that is absolutely terrible. I don't really understand the reason to price it that way. Maybe it's so that they can sell it to carriers for cheap to increase carrier profit or something, but
well, the other thing is that Samsung phones always go on sale, so nobody should buy this at launch. If you really want this phone,
that's a good point.
Wait 3 months and it will probably be $750.
Yeah, because at $750 it would make a lot more sense. Like, as is, it's honestly pretty bad.
Yeah. Also, while the latency is higher on the S Pen, it is lower than the previous phone.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. It's lower than the previous Note series, but not as good as the Ultra. And so it's also not as good as the Apple Pencil.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, the S Pen is kind of useless on a phone.
You also can't use the Apple Pencil on a phone.
Yeah, that's true. But I've never found the S Pen very good on phones. Like, it's just too small of a screen to be that much of a benefit, in my opinion, and I'd take a bigger battery instead. And I've always been a Note fan, but I never really cared for the pen. I just liked them because they were bigger.
I'm surprised that you said bigger battery and not headphone jack.
So I've kind of gotten over the headphone jack thing. And
yeah, but I'm just saying, like, if the space is already there, you could realistically have a slightly bigger battery and a headphone jack in the same amount of space as the stylus.
This is true. Yeah. And they could bring that headphone jack back, which, like, don't get me wrong, I prefer it. I've just gotten over it because at this point, I mean, everybody's just using Bluetooth headphones, and you might as well get an external like portable amplifier if you want to use really good headphones on the go that are wired, so
or buy an LG phone.
What was that?
Or buy an LG phone, since they like using good decks.
Yeah, that's that. Yeah, even then, though, they're not as good as some of the other portable ones you can get from, like, FiO and stuff.
Yeah, but I'm just
they're
saying,
better than the garbage that's put in most
if you're wanting an integrated one.
Yeah, or, well, there's Razers with their actually decent dongle for their USB-C dongle. That one's pretty nice, pretty good built-in DAC.
I did just say integrated.
I know, but So now to move on to the Note 20 Ultra, I am very disappointed in it for one reason. But before I get to that reason, I will first explain that it is running the Snapdragon 865 Plus, so it's a beast. It does have obviously a excess of power, kind of unnecessary though at this point to have something like an 865 Plus. It's obviously waterproof. It's bigger. It's made out of metal. It's kind of a S20, what you would expect an S20 Ultra, but turned into a Note would look like and would behave like. There's nothing too amazing on it. Its zoom is only half that of the S20 Ultra, so it's 50 times instead of 100 times. But I mean, even the zoom like sucks on both of them anyway.
Yeah, I want to jump in real quick on the 865 Plus thing.
Yeah.
I sort of disagree. So one of the other announcements that has come out recently about Samsung, this wasn't specifically just announced in Unpacked, but
yeah,
they are planning on doing 3 generations of updates. So essentially 3 years-ish of updates now instead of 2. And Android phones already have had the problem of being a bit slower after 2 years of updates.
okay, that's true.
And so with 3, yes, there's a lot of headroom for right now.
Yeah.
But that's going to be, it's still probably going to end up being headroom in 3 years, but not a lot. And so
But
I
at
think
least
that
there's
that's
something there. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that's really important, is that for Android phones that are looking at getting more updates, you're going to start needing to look at hardware differently, where people already looked at like, oh, I want the 865 because it's the best thing. I need the fastest, which was
Yes, of course.
unnecessary. Whereas, and that's one of the benefits of what Apple does with having such powerful hardware. Compared to the 865 Plus, the A13 is still way better. But that's going to last you 5-6 years if you choose to go that route. And so
Yeah.
it needs to be better. It needs to have headroom, because if they add features, like the old iPhone SE is getting the current update, but it does struggle a little bit with widgets and stuff, at least in the
That's
current
true.
betas. Now,
Yeah.
obviously, optimization is the last thing they focus on. But when you're looking, what is Android going to have in 3 years that might need a little bit more performance, especially since Google can also shove stuff in through Google Play services.
Right.
And so you're going to need some extra headroom.
I guess that's a good point. On something that's more premium that somebody is going to keep a long time, I guess I'm still in the mindset of replacing a phone every year or 6 months even.
Yeah, but you're abnormal.
Well, I am. I would say in the Android world that's not abnormal, but it's abnormal to do it with the
Yes, it
higher end
is.
phones. To do it with the higher end phones.
No, it's still abnormal, even on low-end phones. I
Yeah.
worked in the cell phone industry. That is not common.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. I guess to that extent though, keeping updates for 3 years, what you were mentioning there, is pretty impressive. It's still nothing like what Apple's doing, really. It's not 5 or 6 years out, but 3 years is still something.
I also wonder if that's something we're going to see come from other phone makers soon, because realistically, the limitation on 2 years was not because of the individual phone maker. There's a
Yeah.
reason that no phone manufacturer had opted to do that before.
Right.
It's not
Right.
because all of them just agreed they didn't want to do it. It's because Qualcomm wasn't giving them the code to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Qualcomm has to update stuff first.
Right. Right.
And
And
so,
then topping that off with the issues with delivering it via carriers and stuff like that.
yeah.
There's
So like
yeah.
if any of the Android phone makers was going to get priority from Qualcomm on a change that Qualcomm is doing lineup wide, it would be
Mhm.
Samsung, because they're the biggest Android phone maker.
Yeah.
And so my assumption is that what's going to happen is that eventually Qualcomm in general is going to be doing 3 years or 3 generations of software updates.
Yeah.
And that will slowly make its way to more and more of the lineup, which Google is trying to push really hard to at least get another year-ish out of updates.
That's true. Yeah.
Because they know that is a big reason people will buy iPhones over Android phones, especially in the budget market. If you
Yes.
can buy a $400 iPhone that's going to last you 6 years and perform reasonably well, because the $400 phone comes with the newest processor.
Well, I mean, heck, even like 3 years is still
Yeah,
better
but I'm
than what
just
the
saying,
other. Yeah.
like if you look at, if you look at an iPhone SE that you buy this year, the newest model with an
Yeah.
A13, and you look at that 5 years from now versus an Android phone 2.5 years from now,
Yeah.
the iPhone 5 years from now is going to perform better, which means it was a way, way better value for the money
Yeah.
compared to something like a Pixel 4a.
This is true. Yeah, that's a good point. And I don't know, with this promise of 3 years of updates, I still wonder like how quickly they're going to get the updates, which I know was something that you had mentioned.
Yes.
And it's like, if they have to deliver it through the carriers and stuff still, and even taking that out of the fact, I mean, they've never been as quick with updates, right? And so it makes me wonder, like, are you going to be, okay, 3 years of updates, but are you 7 months behind,
Yeah. Now that being said, so there is some moves Google is doing. Every version of Android for the last several years has
Yeah,
had new features that make future updates faster.
right.
And while their numbers still sound ridiculous compared to iOS, it is getting much better. And if they can compound on that, and if they can have updates continually get better on that front, make it easier to do the update and get Qualcomm to support the code better,
Yeah, yeah,
then I think we could reasonably get to a point where in 6 months, instead of it being, uh, 5 or 10% at best of Android phones having updates, we probably could get to a point where it's like 25% of the mid to high range phones have the updates in 6 months, and then 10 or 15% of the like super low budget phones, which I do think should be kind of counted separately, because like
yeah,
the super low budget phones being sent to um, markets like India and stuff, they don't necessarily need updates in the same way. That's
right.
not what their market cares about, and they don't really. When you're talking $100 or $200 phones, you're not really competing with Apple either. So while fast
Yeah,
updates are nice, they're not as necessary for phone sales.
right, right. I mean, that's a lower. They're not going to invest the same kind of money into that for sure.
Yeah. But
And
anything they can do to make the 3 years of updates and faster updates is good.
yeah,
And I think that this is just a start of a trend we'll see on Android.
I think so too. Hear me out on this though. I want to get your thoughts. Do you think that the direction that Google has been pushing Android to try and get it to have more updates has been part of what stifled the rapid change and innovation, or do you think it's something else? Because I feel like Android has felt very boring and dull and nothing new for about 3-4 years now. There's been stuff, but I mean, like, it hasn't been the significant updates that it was before that,
I
and
think
Apple
that
is
the
still pushing it
issue,
out.
the difference though, is Google pushed really hard on features,
Yeah,
but didn't push very hard on stability
yeah,
and on user experience. And
right.
Apple pushed really hard on user experience and stability
Hmm.
and didn't push super hard on features. Now, there were some things that they had way before Android,
Yeah,
but there was a lot of things that they didn't, and they're just now getting to because they found the way to do it that fits that like Apple consistency. Like with widgets, for example, um, they have the stackable widgets, but they're much more simplistic widgets. So there's these trade-offs that Apple makes when they do these decisions, whereas Google just goes hard on new features when they have an idea, but they're usually problematic. And so they've spent the last several years. I don't think it's been more so updates that have been the reason they've slowed down on new features. I think it's been fixing their platform.
I guess so. Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess that's part of what's made Android in some ways boring to me, is I've actually felt, people that watch the channel consistently know I switched to iPhone fairly recently, and I've been happier with it. And I guess, some of that comes down to, obviously, is spending a lot of time in apps, and the apps developed for, the App Store are just better. But
Mhm.
some of that comes from, I feel like Apple in a lot of ways actually has more interesting features that are also implemented better than what Google's been pushing around. And
Yeah,
so I guess
and
that's a good point. And I
that's
hope
the other
Google can
thing.
focus on features at some point again, though.
Yeah, but it's like that's the other thing. While Apple had obvious features they needed to implement
Yes.
because they were behind on widgets and things like that.
Or like, notifications back when they didn't have that.
Yeah, like what does Google have? Like Google doesn't have like glaringly obvious features they need to implement. The biggest one I
That's
would say
exactly what
would
I
have.
mean, though. Is that Google doesn't have, like, they don't have glaringly obvious features to. And what I mean is they're not coming up with new ones, and they used to, and then Apple and them would
I
copy
mean,
it
they
later.
didn't used to though. What feature did Google come up with?
I mean, I wouldn't be able
Widgets
to.
were a thing on Mac OS. Like that's not particularly
Yeah, but
new,
you,
like
you kind of
unique
get
to
what I mean.
Android.
I mean, I feel like there was more stuff happening at the time where Google was trying to do more interesting stuff with the platform. And now it's just, I feel like every update has been just, oh, better updates, and Google Assistant's gotten better.
I think that's just more so because there just is less that is good, that would be good for a phone that they can just put in.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm saying those things have to be invented, right? I'm not saying that
No,
there's
I know,
things that we know
that.
of
I'm
that are
saying
missing.
of what we could invent that would work well for a phone. I just don't think there probably is a whole lot.
But
Like,
we don't know what
there's
we could
only
invent. That's the point of inventing.
okay, but that's not a helpful conversation to have. Is oh, they should just make up something because they should. Like, we need, we can't really talk about whether or not there would be a good new potential features without
Well,
some
right,
kind of
right. I'm just
idea.
saying they
Like,
haven't
is
done
there
anything.
anything that as you use the phone you think should be improved upon? If not, like then, like realistically, like most people would probably say on Android, stability. Um,
Stability, messages is a huge one, of course. Their messaging still is terrible.
well, yeah, but Google doesn't know what they're doing with
I
messages.
guess I guess maybe that's part of what it comes from is Google just they kill stuff so fast, and maybe that's why in some ways it feels like there hasn't been as much interesting stuff, is because everything they put out there they either do or I worry that they will kill.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I feel like mobile phone operating systems are relatively mature at this point, and with
Yeah.
any OS, I mean, you look at Windows even over the last several years or last several versions, even from XP to 10, they
Hmm.
haven't added that many like big features.
I would
It
say they
was
have. I would say there's been a lot of change. I
there's been a
mean,
lot of
but
visual change
well, not just visual change. I mean, there's been a lot of stuff. I mean, the
for consumers. I'm not talking for like
yeah, I guess so.
niche
Yeah.
situations. Because that's the thing is Google isn't focused on niche situations. They're focused
Hmm.
on the billion users.
Yeah, yeah, I suppose.
Um, Whereas iOS had features that they were definitely lacking in comparison to
Yeah. And I
Android.
guess
Now that
that's
was
what's changed. Yeah, is like Android was doing so much different, and now that Apple is kind of caught up with that, because then the Apple philosophy around trying to make things more stable and easier to use is more beneficial when there aren't all these new features that Android has. So
mhm.
I guess Google's only option is to try and focus on stability, reliability, updates, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, and then also like if we want to talk about innovation, and this gets into the next product we were going to talk about, like there is something big that Google has been working on at an OS level, and
True.
that is foldable phones.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's just not something that you're going to see on a non-foldable phone.
Right, right. I have odd opinions about foldable phones and screens that large, though. And I
I
guess,
dig them. I just think that the issue is that because Google did a bad job with tablet support in the past and getting
hmm,
developers to make tablet apps, that despite them being ahead on OS development and phone development, Apple will have an inherent advantage when they decide to release a similar product if they do in a few years.
yeah, because they
Because
already have
Apple will
so
have,
many apps for big
es-
screens.
especially with Apple Silicon Macs, where they're literally getting
Yeah,
developers to design apps that will work across all sorts of hardware and screen size with one code base,
right.
they will have such an advantage over Google.
That's a good point. That's a good point. And what this leads into is the Galaxy Z Fold 2, because they had to add a Z in there for whatever reason. Now the price is unknown, but people are guessing 2,000 or higher.
That's my guess too.
Yeah,
My guess is
yeah.
2,000. I think that they would want to price it higher, but I think that 2,000 is the
Kind of the
we can
limit.
get super power users and YouTubers to buy this phone
Yeah.
price limit.
Yeah, I think so too. You start reaching 2,500, nobody is going to buy it even if they're passionate about it.
Yeah, because like realistically, if you're super hardcore into Android and you're already looking at buying like let's say a Note 20 Ultra,
Yeah.
okay, you're spending $1,200, and you also might want a tablet. Even if you get a relatively mediocre Samsung tablet, you're looking at $500-$600. So 2,000 to get
Yeah.
both in one product is it's
Uh,
still extremely expensive, but it's not unrealistic or it's not unreasonable for the two products that you're getting in one.
that's true. That's true. And that's why I feel like foldables do have obviously a big advantage there. So a couple things to touch on too is so the front finally has a big screen. So the front side of it's more usable as a normal phone, is a 6.2-inch display at 2260 by 18 by 816.
And it doesn't
Um
look stupid anymore. The
yeah.
previous phone looked kind of dumb
Oh, it looked
with the
bad.
small phone
Yeah.
screen.
Yeah, it was pretty gross actually. I was pretty disappointed in it.
Yeah.
So this looks actually usable now as a phone without having to unfold it. Now, what I will say is you know, well, I'll get the bigger the inside screen. I'll talk about that first. So 7.6-inch display on the inside, so it's pretty huge at 2208 by 1768 resolution. and at 120 hertz. And as far as I understand, the 120 hertz is at that resolution consistently. Unlike the Note 20 Ultra that for whatever reason can only do 1440 at 120, or sorry,
Why?
at 60 or 1080 at 120, which like 1080 at 120 on a phone as expensive as the Note 20 Ultra just makes me like want to puke. That's horrible.
Mike, and this actually does make me think that it's deliberate by Samsung.
Yeah.
As much as we like to talk about the S20 Ultra as like a power user product,
Yeah.
or the Note 20 Ultra,
Right, right.
it's a mainstream product.
I guess that's true, but
Like relatively, well off normies buy the
yeah,
Note line.
that's true.
The Fold lineup is still an extremely power user focused device.
That's
The people
true. Yeah.
almost I would argue almost every single person buying the Fold 2 is going to notice if it had a 120 hertz screen and didn't run at full resolution at 120 hertz because they would check that stuff. Whereas,
Normal users just don't.
yeah, and from
Yeah.
from my experience when I did work with cell phone, in the cell phone industry more, most of the people buying the Note lineup, even the most expensive top tier storage, dropping absurd amounts of money on phones, wouldn't notice that stuff.
Yeah. I suppose that's true. I guess what bugs me though a lot of times about these features that sometimes the excuse is we don't want to add that feature because normal people aren't going to care. Always makes me in the back of my head think, okay, then just add it in a different settings section that's harder to get to. Like, so a great example of that is like Windows 10 and its updates, right? Like,
Mhm.
why do we have to go through all this rigmarole as a power user in terms of registry edits and group policy edits to prevent those updates when they could just put it in like the developer options section of a settings app or something like that, where it's like only the power users, like we obviously want normal users to get auto updates, but then the power users can turn it off when they need to.
So in the case of that, I actually think that's a little bit more reasonable than something like the resolution
Mm-hmm.
situation, because a normal user, if they want to disable the updates and they don't see it in the update section, they're
They'll
gonna
look a
do
lot
just they'll just
online.
do a Google search, and if it's still extremely easy to do,
Yeah,
they'll just
that's a good
do it.
point.
That's not stopping them. And also, if you search the settings on Windows, you'd still find it even if it was in developer settings.
Yeah, that's true.
Um, Unless they opted to start doing something like how Android used or does hide developer settings behind like weird button taps.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and so like for that situation, it's not if you just hide it behind developer settings, it's not like uh prohibitive in doing it.
yeah, that's
Whereas
true.
having to do registry edits will scare people out of doing it.
Right.
And Microsoft would much rather piss off a few power users who don't have another OS to go to, um, than they would have people who don't know better disable updates and miss security updates that Microsoft then gets blamed for people getting compromised.
Yeah, okay, that's a good point. But you get what I was
Whereas this
getting at though with
resolution
the
thing,
displays.
yeah,
Yeah, like I feel like they should just have a tick box hidden in developer options or something for it. Because the display can probably do it. And maybe though, maybe part of it is they're worried about battery and not battery life, but I mean battery in terms of output, in terms of amperage and getting too hot and stuff like that. Maybe that's, I don't know, just a thought.
yeah, that could be it actually, because Samsung would, of all companies, be much more concerned about that and like be much more careful, seeing
Yeah.
as how the Note lineup of all phone lineups was a bomb.
Yes, yes, exactly. So, I don't know. Yeah, I think that's the only logical reason I can really think of for it. But maybe they're just being stupid too.
Yeah,
But back to the Z Fold, and apologies to
yeah.
everybody for my
Well,
dog barking.
it's always okay when dogs bark in podcasts.
It's true.
Everyone's okay with that.
Everybody's like, "Oh,
Um,
doggy."
Getting into it though, also like since we don't know when this is releasing, I'm wondering if it's that they just expect that the displays will be like, or the ones that are they're prepping for this are a little bit more matured than the ones that they're prepping for the Note 20. Because like, yes,
Mm,
you can make 1440p 120 hertz displays, but it's still not something that's like easy for
yeah, that's
phone
true.
makers to do.
Yeah.
Um, and so like the thing that makes me think that is like the next feature we're going to talk about is that the Z Fold 2 has Wi-Fi 6E, which is I think one of the if not the first phones to be announced with that feature.
It is. I believe it's the first one. Yeah.
Um, and I don't think that probably means it's not coming in the next couple of months.
Yeah.
Because Wi-Fi 6E was just recently like finalized.
Yeah,
because
yeah, it
it was
was.
just recently allowed by the FCC.
Yeah, there's no
Um,
like, there's no Wi-Fi points that can output 6E yet.
yeah, and
Yeah,
so like my guess is this is an end of the year phone, and they have time to mature that. And then the other
and
thing
that's
is
why we
that
don't know the price yet either.
if this
Yeah,
is a $2,000 phone, they're probably not super concerned about yields.
yeah, that's true
Whereas
too.
on a $1,200 phone that will no doubt get price dropped much faster than the Z Fold 2,
Right.
they have to be concerned about yields of the displays.
And I'm not gonna lie, in some ways I do want the Z Fold too.
Oh
But
yeah, if I
yeah,
was to go back to Android, it would be for a foldable.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Same here. Now here's the thing though. Here's my interesting thought about the foldable, right? So I like the idea of foldables. A lot of it though is just because I like a bigger screen, and the way that the Z Fold is designed is it's still two-handable, typable as a big screen because it's still not like as wide as something like an iPad, right? And
Yeah,
so
well, my guess with how Apple would do it is it would be an iPad, it would be like an iPhone 11 Pro Max that opens up into like an iPad Mini.
yeah, yeah. And so the thing about this is like I actually don't like the idea of such a big screen for multitasking. Multitasking on phones is still a joke. And even on tablets, if you don't have a dedicated keyboard, is still a joke because the keyboard has to take up a lot of space. And
I disagree
so,
with that though because there's plenty of multitasking situations that don't need a keyboard.
name some because I've never been able to find one myself that I would actually want to use. Obviously, you can open up like two videos or something. I suppose reading and like watching a video at the same time, but then you're not really watching the video.
I mean, you can have like a video up with like informational stuff as you're like reading through an article that like is related, but not really getting to that. Like I've had situations where like I've, for example, been playing a game on my iPad while having a related article about the game, a wiki open. Um,
Yeah, but that's on your iPad when you're using a
yes,
keyboard, a desktop keyboard. Otherwise, you would have to play.
no, no, it's called using a touchscreen to play the game
Huh. Yeah,
because
I just feel like it's kind of a
that
niche
some phones have
area.
touchscreens.
And
Oh, no
so,
doubt,
yeah,
but
yeah.
so is like multitasking in general on devices, like mobile devices, is relatively niche. It's not like a normal thing that people, other than like
Hmm.
audio in an article or
Yeah.
video and one other thing.
And
But like even like documents and a web page is still not something that like most people I know that have tablets do.
yeah.
Um, and then getting into that deeper, it's really uncommon on phones as much as Samsung likes to push the idea.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess
Um,
what I'm getting at here, I guess, is in comparison to something like the Surface Duo, right? Where the Surface Duo is, two screens, right? It's a phone, two screens, instead of a
yeah,
folding
it's not
screen.
a. I hate that people call it a foldable. It's not a foldable.
Yeah, it's not really foldable, but what's weird about that to me is because if you're using that to multitask, because that's one of the big advertised things about it, it's like okay, either you have it in landscape mode, you're using an entire half of the phone for typing, and then the other half is for whatever you're looking at, so you're still kind of single tasking,
I mean,
or
there's
go ahead.
good.
Or you are like what do? You have an article on the left side, you have the keyboard like half size or quarter size of the screen that's really hard to type on, or you have the keyboard covering half the screen again, like half of both screens.
Yeah. Now I feel like um for the Surface Duo, the problem is actually worse than on something like this Z Fold 2. Because like for the Z Fold 2, you could still reasonably have, let's say the bottom half of the opened up screen is the
Yeah,
keyboard in any
yeah, yeah.
orientation.
Whereas you really
And then you
couldn't
could
in
have, yeah, and then you could have an article on one half and a document on the other half, and you could still reasonably type well on that with how much, even if it's only
yeah.
a quarter of the screen, that's still a few inches. That's still your BlackBerry's screen size worth of screen real estate.
No, that's true. That's true. Yeah. And so I think it's so what I guess my thing that I get at though is like the way I would see myself using this is something like messaging and stuff like that, having full screen apps, but just having a bigger screen. And so I'd obviously have to feel it in hand first to see if I feel like it's too wide to type with thumbs. But
Mhm.
normally I like something bigger to type on, so I think I would enjoy it. And like in some ways, if I'm being honest, like I mean, I would really miss obviously Apple's ecosystem and stuff, but this is the kind of phone that would make me consider switching back.
Yeah, my concern would just be the app support.
Yeah, yeah, that would be a that would be a that would be a
Like
problem.
I really wish that all the way going back to fucking, what was it, Honeycomb on the Motorola Zoom,
Yeah, I remember
that
that.
Google would have taken tablets more seriously. Because I had a Motorola Zoom. It was great for what it was, but
Yeah.
it's just they never put in the work to get the apps there.
Yeah, I was a
Um,
Zoom user as well. That was my first tablet experience.
yeah,
And then I
like
switched to iPad and realized how much better it was, even at that
yeah,
time.
and like that's really what it comes down to. Is Apple got developers to adopt the layout for apps, and
Yeah.
it's Google's never been as good at getting apps to be optimized for their device, and that's just going to come with the nature. Like that's not necessarily a Google thing. Google has to do more work than Apple
Right.
because Google has more devices than Apple running its OS, and
Yep.
it's inherently more complicated.
Yeah.
But if Google's going to sell these devices, or not sell because they don't sell all this stuff, but if Google is going to push these devices and push new form factors like foldables, which they are, they're
Yeah.
specifically updating and working on Android for it, they need to get at least the big developers on board.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I don't know. We'll just see when it comes out because it's kind of intriguing to me.
Yeah,
But
I
I don't
I
know.
I would love if, like, between Google and Samsung, they just said, "Screw it, we're gonna pay app developers to get support for this," because that's what it needs is just the apps.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
It's the biggest thing holding back foldables, I think. I mean, we'll have to see how the durability is, but
Hmm.
with supposedly improved durability, and with the improved design, and
Well,
with
and
the
the
improved
bigger screen on the
hardware,
outside makes it so that the inside durability doesn't matter quite as much, too,
yeah,
because
you're
you
gonna,
don't have to open it every time you want to do literally anything.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, we'll see. I think that we're reaching a point now where, like, this to me feels like Gen 1 of the hardware, whereas the previous Z Fold felt like the beta.
Yeah, completely agree. Yeah, I had no interest in the previous Z Fold. Yeah, I felt like a beta. So I don't know. We'll see when this comes out. I feel like still the biggest thing that would keep me from wanting to leave iPhone again would be iMessage being so freaking good.
Mhm.
But I don't know. We'll see if Google ever gets their messaging, fixed. Because they've been trying to do that for 7 years now. So,
Yeah.
and going through iterations of the way they implement Hangouts or the way they implement Allo or the way they implement messages and, the drastic changes that Hangouts had where they added features that made it almost as good and then removed features is just disgusting. Oh man. Um okay, so then the last thing from Unpacked is the Galaxy Beans. So these are the Galaxy Buds Live, but we're all just gonna call them Galaxy Beans because they look like beans. Now these are interesting. There's some inherent issues with them. So the first thing I'll get at is they're $170. So they're more expensive than AirPods, but they're less expensive than the Pro, obviously. They look really weird. They do look like a bean. I'll put some footage up of them. They're very odd design wise. And they're only IPX2 rated, which is something that does bother me because they're basically good enough to like use in the rain, but even then with an
In my
X2,
opinion, that's perfectly fine. The point of having that rating is just for sweat resistance.
yeah.
And in my opinion, for headphones, like, sweat and rain is all you need.
I would feel sketched out with this rating using them in the rain though. IPX3? No, but 2? Yeah.
Mhm.
I don't feel like I need 4 to use it in the rain.
Yeah. Well, also
4 is
keep in
for
mind,
swimming.
Samsung has historically had the actual capabilities of their water resistance be much higher um than their rating.
That's true. I mean, back when there was the what was it? It was the Note 5. No, was the 5 the one that exploded, or was that the 7? I can't remember now.
It was the Note 7, I
The
think, that
7. Okay,
exploded.
yeah. So back when the Note 5 was around, I remember using that like in hot tubs and stuff and not having any issues with it. So
Well, and then there was what I forgot what phone it was, but I think it was a Samsung phone where Linus like had looked at had like scuba dived with it, and it
yeah,
lasted way, way, way deeper than the rating.
yeah, yeah.
Because the thing is that, as you know, OnePlus has often talked about, the equipment to do the rating testings
Hmm.
and the work to do the ratings is expensive, and you have to test every single phone that comes off the production line. It is
Yeah, yeah.
not something where you test the design and then move on.
Right.
And so with headphones, obviously, if you're testing, you know, IPX2, which is like splash resistance, that's relatively easy to test compared to any kind of submergence testing. And with headphones where you're trying to produce them for $170, you obviously want the testing to be super, super cheap. So
Although
my
I don't know
assumption,
how that testing's actually done, because I think they put them in a pressurized tube.
I don't know how IPX2 testing is. I know that with what OnePlus was showing, there was like some significant equipment to do like spraying as well as pressurized testing. My assumption is that it's different for each rating.
Okay,
though, because obviously how you would go about testing products that you're
I'm
not
thinking of watch
expecting
ratings too. That's my bad. Watch ratings, they put them in a pressure tube. That was me thinking backwards. Yeah.
Because like since you have to test each individual product as it's coming off the production line, you wouldn't want to test it with something that 1 out of every 100 it would break. You'd want to test it with one that you know would be good.
Right.
And so if, let's say, IPX3, realistically 99% of these headphones are,
you don't want to overrate.
They're going to go for that rating.
Yeah, that's true. So they look interesting. The biggest complaint about them so far is that their active noise canceling is pretty trash. By that I mean like it always is letting in external noise at all times. It's just that the active noise canceling can sometimes drown out things like a bus or maybe a plane. But it sounds like it's really low frequency specific. So on a plane, you'd still probably have some serious annoyances. It could maybe improve. Maybe they're going to be able to do some work on it, but I don't think they're very good at noise isolation. So that also can, I don't know, it just feels like that's an area that they're pushing too hard with marketing and is not that good. And that's something I always like to look at a product from is what are they pushing in marketing? And one of the things they marketed a lot was the noise cancellation, but it kind of sucks. So, and then some of the reviews or people that got hands-on more so with it said that they have had some minor Bluetooth connection issues, whereas they never had that with like the Galaxy Buds Plus and the old Galaxy Buds 2 and stuff like that. But these are still early, so that could be fixed. It may not be a hardware issue.
Yeah, and I was gonna say I wonder if it's something that they might even be able to just fix with a firmware update.
Yeah, exactly. It could be a power saving feature that's being too aggressive or something like that. Yeah. So speaking about some of the comparisons we have with Apple there, we wanted to jump into some of Apple's App Store policies. So
Oh yes. So Apple has been under big flack for their App Store policies, and in my opinion, some of the flack has been really dumb.
Agreed. Yeah, some of it's been stupid.
However, there's been a big question about why the xCloud beta only had one game on iOS, whereas it had most all of the games on Android.
Right.
In the beta. So you could only do the iCloud beta or the xCloud beta on iOS with Halo Master Chief Collection and not any other game.
Yep.
And people were like, I think it was Master Chief. It's one of the Halo games. People were like, why? And also, why isn't Stadia available? And why isn't PlayStation Now available? And why isn't any other game streaming service available?
I don't even know if Steam Link is.
Steam Link was not for a while.
That's right. There was a big war. Yeah.
They got approval because Steam Link is not streaming services or streaming games from the cloud, but streaming games from your device. And so it falls more under remote desktop service than it does cloud gaming service.
Right. Okay.
Which is an odd distinction because of the end result. So essentially, the reason that Apple is not allowing these game streaming services for now, I do think that this is all going to change.
Probably.
But the reason that they are not allowing it is because they cannot test and approve individual games. And that makes relative sense. Their App Store policy is that they need to test every game on their platform and every app on their platform. And so it would be reasonable that if you could just stream that game or app, you could bypass their policies. And so I think that is the Apple logic behind not allowing it. Because let's say
why doesn't Apple just test every game like they do with apps, right?
The issue for those wondering that question legitimately is that if Microsoft adds a game to xCloud, it does not require a software update for xCloud. Yep. And so they don't test that upon approval. If you submit an update as an app developer to Apple has to approve that. But if you're not updating your app, they don't there's nothing for them to approve. There's no change.
Yeah, yeah.
And so unless they were to constantly be policing your app, which Apple generally doesn't do unless some big issue comes up, they don't generally go back and look at apps they've already approved because they
Hmm.
would assume they've approved them correctly.
Yeah.
Um, they don't. They just don't bother, and that makes sense from a I guess employee workforce standpoint. You don't want to have your employees have to not just approve every app and every update, but then go back and check literally everything.
Hmm.
Um, however, the issue is that this kind of hits a point similar to Netflix, for example. So books, streaming services, music services all function as essentially portals for other content. And Apple has specific rules in place for those portals of content. Well, game streaming is just a portal for content.
Yeah.
In fact, from my understanding, while some of the interactive content is not enabled on Netflix for iOS and for tvOS, that is not an App Store policy. That is Netflix having not done the work to enable them on those platforms.
Hmm.
Theoretically, like Minecraft on Netflix, which is an interactive content, is available on there. So
Yeah.
why, from Apple's point of view, why is that different than Gears of War?
Right, right.
Why is that different than Forza? Like they're both interactive entertainment content.
Yeah, that's true.
And so I think Apple's probably just, before Stadia and xCloud, they probably just weren't concerned enough about PlayStation Now, which was trash in the past. It's gotten way better, but
Yeah.
because PlayStation hasn't made like a big show off of their service or like a rebranding, nobody takes it seriously.
Yeah.
And all of the other previous game streaming services, Gaikai, GeForce Now's betas and stuff, nobody ever took seriously. So like, why would Apple? But now that we have, I guess Stadia, which still nobody takes seriously because it's kind of a joke,
It's so
but
bad.
xCloud, which
Kind
is
of. Totally is a joke.
xCloud, which in my opinion is much more of like the first like
Real.
real game streaming service.
I agree entirely. Yeah.
They're now having to address this policy, and I think that that's why we're going to see some change. Is that they're now having to reevaluate
Yeah.
the balancing act that they're going to have to find, and they've found this with Netflix. They found this with Prime Now. They found this with Hulu, YouTube, everything. Is how do you ensure that you're not playing favorites on the big names while ensuring that the apps enforce your policies? Obviously, like with video streaming services, you don't want, from Apple's point of view, I guess, not necessarily a consumer's point of view, because some consumers would love this, but you don't want a video streaming service on the App Store that also allows porn.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a lot of games that are near porn or like very, very sexual that are on Steam, for example.
Oh yeah.
But you can stream those games from your computer to your iPhone, but you can't stream Forza from your Xbox or from xCloud to
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
iPhone. Where does that make sense? And so it's like they need to
Right.
figure out their policy for that. And I think that my guess is within 3 months, xCloud will be approved fully.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's going to happen at some point, and it's going to show that this kind of stuff is possible to not be completely horrible the way Stadia has been. We'll see, but I have a lot more confidence in xCloud. I feel like Google kind of jumped up one day and was like, hey, we're releasing this thing and it's going to be better than everybody's, and we're releasing it in 6 months, and then they released it and it was terrible. And Microsoft's been working on this for a really long time.
Yeah. Well, and then the other thing with the comparison between xCloud and Stadia is that Microsoft didn't promise a bunch of features that would be there relatively quickly that haven't shown up like 6 months or a year later.
Yeah.
Whereas almost every feature besides simply being able to play games on Stadia is non-existent.
The Wi-Fi controller support crap still doesn't exist.
It does only on very specific devices, only on Chromecast
right.
and Chromebooks, I think.
Yeah. So I guess what I mean is like it doesn't exist to the extent they thought they talked like it would.
But in my opinion, that's harder to implement than YouTube integration, and they don't have the ability to stream Stadia games to YouTube.
I can't even.
How?
Yeah, dude, it's bad. I don't get it. I really don't. I hope xCloud's good. I mean, I still obviously there's still the inherent latency issues that you just can't get rid of, but
Yeah,
I
I mean, I think though that one of the things with xCloud that's going to be helpful is this obviously won't be helpful for well, it will be in some regards, but not as much for like when you're actually trying to play and you're out and about.
mhm.
Um, but similar to PlayStation and their game streaming, where they've already had remote play for years, where you could play from your
From your
PlayStation
console.
3 even to your
Yeah.
PlayStation Portable. And so that on local Wi-Fi, like from Xbox to your Android phone or iPhone eventually,
Yes. Yes.
will be fantastic if you want to have a Switch-esque experience where you can just play games in your room and your Xbox is in the living room.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Um,
Well,
the
and if
actual
they can implement that in a way where even when you're on external networks, it could potentially still use your home console, and
oh, that's
then
the
it
plan.
can run a quick latency test. Yeah, and just figure out, oh, your console is going to be lower latency connection right now than xCloud's server services, so we'll connect you to your console, and that's going to
Yeah.
help out too.
Microsoft, I mean, they haven't said it in that way where it would be like latency checking, but they've already
Yeah.
said like you will be able to use your Xbox as essentially your like host. And
Hmm.
my guess as to exactly how they'll do that is if you have Game Pass Ultimate, it'll do a latency check for which one would be better.
Hmm.
And if you don't have Game Pass Ultimate, because Game Pass Ultimate includes xCloud,
Right.
if you don't have that, then you'll be able to stream from your Xbox to um,
Your
your phone or
phone or
tablet or
whatever. Yeah.
whatever, assuming you own the game. And so it's like xCloud will be for Game Pass, and then non xCloud will be from your console only.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that makes sense. And that I don't know, it's interesting to see things move in this direction, and then of course we have things like keyboard and mouse support for iPad. So then potentially you could have like an iPad that you're playing, console or PC level games on with just a little bit of extra latency.
Yeah, I mean, already with iOS 14, though, you'll be able to play games like Fortnite at 120 FPS on your iPad with keyboard and mouse, which you,
This is true, yeah, yeah, but what I mean is obviously games like Halo and stuff that are going to be more difficult to run.
yeah.
It'd be interesting to use, see that as a possibility. It's kind of crazy,
Hmm.
and obviously for shooters and stuff like that, it's a little more important to have lower latency, but for story-based games it's totally usable. Even Stadia's latency, when it's not having problems, which it usually is, but when it's not, it's playable, for a
Hmm.
not shooter game, but playing something like The Witcher or whatever, right? Or maybe Cyberpunk
Yeah.
when that comes out, although that's kind of shooter, but you get the point. And so like I personally could see myself using my iPad as a replacement gaming PC using a streaming service if it actually wasn't garbage like Stadia is.
Hmm.
Because when I'm out on the go, I'm not going to care as much about playing something that is, latency dependent or is, peripheral dependent like Elite Dangerous or whatever.
Yeah. We just need Apple to change their App Store policies,
Yes, yes. And it'll be
which,
interesting because like I'm going to be trying this myself. It'll be interesting to see what it's like.
yeah. And it's like this is the worst time for Apple's App Store policies to be coming up in such a big way with like such a big type of product,
Yeah,
because of all of the legal issues that they're facing.
right.
Um, and like, I really hate the discussion around App Store policies and stuff because like there are legitimate issues that the App Store policies have brought forth, and there's
Yeah,
legitimate discussions to be had about Apple's 30% cut. And like that's
right.
all fine and dandy. But I really, really dislike how so many people are talking about how we just need to make it so that Apple allows another app store as if that will fix a damn thing. Because you know
Yeah.
what hasn't changed any of Google's policies? The app stores on Android with fucking 1% market share. You really think that Apple users are going to be more likely to download a fucking alternate app store than Google users? No.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
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 And so if it's not going to change Google's stance on anything, how the fuck do people think it's going to change Apple's stance? We're wasting our time. We're wasting potential regulatory changes on trying to force Apple to do that change when we could be implementing real change that will actually matter.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. There's too much
Why?
conversation
I
around
just
it.
I
Yeah.
don't get it. Even Tim Sweeney, if Tim Sweeney's been harping on Apple hard, and I get it. There's some issues he has because Fortnite could make a lot more money if they didn't have to use the App Store.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
here's the thing: Fortnite For all it, yes, sure, initially it launched off the Play Store. It still caved and got on the Play Store.
Yeah, yeah.
And also, if anyone was to ever prove that an alternate app store could work on a mobile platform, it would be Tim Sweeney, because he could make Epic Store for Android and get a bunch of games to join it with a 12% cut like they did Epic Store. They could buy exclusives, do whatever, prove to people that it can work,
Yeah.
and then go after Apple for it. But if you can't do that on Android, then there's no way it's going to work on iOS. So
It's
until
true.
you've proven that, why waste your time trying to push for alternate app stores that won't help?
Yeah, they won't make a difference. It's weird.
Push for
Yeah.
policies that will actually matter and stop wasting time on things that won't.
There's a little too much of that going on in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, fun. Oh man. Well, I think that's pretty much it when it comes to those App Store policies there. So
Yeah, but we can talk about market share in a different way.
we can definitely talk about market share in a different way, in a much more positive way. So AMD has had record market share. Not that the record market share was unexpected, because they've had record market share every quarter for quite some time now. But this is their highest market share in x86 processor market since 2013, which is a pretty big deal in and of itself. So they are sitting right now at 18.3% out of all x86 market share, and this was done by Mercury Research. They're a pretty reliable research company. And 18.3%, that includes servers, mobile, and desktop. So it's the whole x86 market as a whole, which is different than what AMD necessarily pulls from. So don't expect these numbers to exactly match up with like what AMD is pulling, because they have certain qualifications of what devices count and stuff as market share, whereas this is just CPUs, like flat out. Now to go through some of the fun numbers here. So their market share is 19.2% in the desktop, so a little higher. 19.9% in the mobile market, which is higher than I think we expected it to be at this point in time.
Yeah, I expected mobile to be lower than desktop.
Yeah, same. So it was pretty crazy to see that we're getting more mobile market share, but it's just because we're starting to see some OEMs finally implement AMD's products, which is just fantastic. Because they're honestly, like, every review of mobile AMD chips right now has been like, oh yeah, they're winning, which is about what we would have expected based on, the desktop parts. And then their server market share is 5.8%, which is not very huge, but what's important to keep in mind about that is that they were back at effectively 0% only like 4 years ago. Like, so you go back to quarter 2 2018, their server market share was 1.4%. And so before that, before Zen was around, before Epic, it was even lower. So this is actually a huge clawback from AMD. And obviously we'd like to see that closer to, the 40 to 50% range, for good competition, because we only have two people there, or two companies there right now. But it's still awesome to see them making that kind of a pull there. And so just to go over a couple of the prior quarters. So Q4 2019, desktop was 18.3%. and mobile was 16.2, and server was 4.5. And then you go to Q1 of 2020, desktop's 18.6%, 17.1% for mobile, and 4.5% for server. So you can see this pretty consistent growth, and mobile's the one that actually blew up between Q1 and Q2 this year. Pretty crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, and I wonder how this conversation is going to change as ARM grows, because
Yeah.
ARM is already being implemented in server.
Right.
And we've seen more and more of that. I think AWS is implementing some new ARM servers and stuff.
Most server platforms are, yeah.
Yeah, and so it's like that's going to change the discussion. And then Apple Silicon is obviously going to have some impact. Apple's not huge market share wise on desktop and laptop,
Yeah.
but it will have some swing on that. And then it will no doubt influence Windows, especially if Apple does come in and cut pricing
Yes.
with Apple Silicon and within a couple of years. It will no doubt change ARM for
Or even
Windows.
this year.
I'd be surprised if year one they did a price cut. They
Yeah.
might do it. They might do it on one product just to be like, see how much better this is. Like everyone should use Apple Silicon.
Yeah.
Like release the $799 base MacBook,
Right.
and everything else in the lineup stay the same. But I'm talking like a couple of years from now when they could theoretically shift the whole product stack down $100 or $200, because
Yeah, that's true.
the fact of the matter is that the most expensive Apple chip that we know of is the A13 at $64, which is much cheaper than Apple pays for anything from Intel,
Oh yeah, or
including
pretty
their
much
shittiest
anybody pays
processor.
for
Yeah.
anything. Yeah. So it'll. I guess we'll have to start factoring in, ARM architecture into some of these judgments, right now, because this is obviously based x86 specific, but x86 even currently still covers basically all compute that's not hypermobile like phones and tablets, but
Yeah.
that is
But
definitely changing.
also, when do we start counting tablets, for example,
Hmm.
in the laptop-esque space?
Well, right. Yeah.
Obviously, they're
Yeah.
not a laptop, so you don't count them as a laptop. But when they're hitting that type of productivity feature with iPad OS, as that continually improves
Right.
and is better at multitasking, and let's be real, for most normal laptop users, they would be just fine with a Chromebook or an iPad. And so it's like, when do you start counting iPad against that market share?
Yeah, and same with servers using ARM chips. When do you start counting
Mhm.
that as well? So
Yeah.
at some point we need to see, server and mobile and desktop segments, including things like ARM instead of just
Mhm.
x86. But I
I
think
think the
that'll probably start to change
funny
next year.
Yeah, I think the funniest one will be desktop because, like, there is already ARM laptop. Oh, I mean, there is ARM laptops, but
Yeah,
I'm counting iPad in that because iPad makes up more of a market share than any of the actual ARM laptops.
the ARM laptops
And
right
then
now
there is
suck.
ARM
Yeah,
servers, but, like, there's not really ARM desktops. I mean, there's,
no.
like, Raspberry Pi, but, like, I'm talking, like, actual, like, relatively, like, performant desktops.
Like
There's
a desktop
not.
you can do work on. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Whereas, once we get the ARM iMac, there will be. Once we get
yeah.
the ARM uh, Mac Mini, there will be.
Hmm.
And so, like, that'll be the interesting one, I think.
There will be some teething issues, of course, but
Mhm.
I mean, I fully expect things like OBS to not support ARM right away, but it'll be interesting to see when things
I
move in that
wonder
direction.
how well Rosetta will work for that because what we're seeing, like,
Yeah.
there was a tweet from someone who works at Disney as a software engineer on some of their video software, and
Hmm.
they were talking about how um, Rosetta is way better than they expected it to be.
Huh.
At like complicated stuff because it works at install time.
It'll be interesting
Um,
to see how well it works because, like, obviously we have Qualcomm and Microsoft working together for their x86 emulation on ARM, but of course it's live emulation, not at install time. But it's interesting to see how bad that's been, and that's by the people that specialize in ARM. um,
well, I mean, Apple specializes in ARM
oh
as
no, I know, but I mean
well,
like people like the people that specialize in ARM that are actually selling products to people other than just making them
but
for themselves.
Apple's worked on ARM chips more significantly than Qualcomm has for a longer period of time because
Yeah,
Qualcomm didn't have the architectural license. Qualcomm essentially
right.
just repackaged chips for a while.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Um, and then also because Apple is in software development, whereas Qualcomm is not, they have more experience on that front.
Right.
Whereas you have Apple and Microsoft, or you have Qualcomm and Microsoft working together to achieve something that Apple is doing in house completely.
Yeah, that's a
And
good point.
then Apple also has experience with architectural changes, whereas Windows hasn't had a significant change in a very, very long, like, what was
Ever?
the last
I
yeah, what
mean,
was the last
basically back.
non-x86 thing they were on?
Yeah, I mean it was back when obviously when we had 32-bit instead, but like that was not really.
Yeah,
That's still x86 instruction set. That was the
yeah,
big architectural change back in Windows 7 when we saw 64-bit become more popular, and I guess even back in like Vista. But
yeah.
yeah,
So, like, that's where I think, like, Apple just has the advantage, and then also the other thing is that because, Apple runs successful app stores and Windows does not.
yeah, this is true. The Windows App Store doesn't make any sense. Remember when I was trying to get the like Windows version of Minecraft installed instead of using Java
Yeah.
and searching, or no, it was when I was trying to get Minecraft Dungeons as well. It
Mhm.
was both situations, and searching for Minecraft came up with neither one in the Windows Store. But if I clicked it from the website that takes me to the Windows Store, it would take me to that place.
Yeah.
It's terrible. So
So,
that's a good point. That's a very good point.
yeah. And I wonder, like, just it's going to be so fascinating to see what someone like AMD does to compete with the power advantages that we we believe ARM has. And I'm saying we believe because like
We
we
haven't seen
haven't really
ARM like.
seen, yeah, we haven't seen ARM for laptop, like for like a MacBook
Mhm.
Pro-esque laptop.
Though we
And
have seen
so
high clocked ARM for servers, and that has been proven more efficient. So, high
yes, but
clock rates and stuff. That
but
says
in that
something.
case though, with servers, you're getting much more focus built applications. And
Yeah.
so having applications designed specifically for that architecture is a little bit different. Obviously, eventually, Apple's stuff will be designed better for ARM.
Yeah, though even in that direction though, the power usage obviously in part is tied to the instructions specifically being used, just like we like AVX 512 on Intel stuff right now like produces way more heat than some of the
Mhm.
other instructions, but these servers are under really 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 high load consistently at high clock speeds, and that can give us a decent idea of what the heat output and power usage is going to be, because
Yeah.
it's not like we're going to
The
see like that many different instructions on desktop or laptop.
the other thing though, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't know as much about the server side of ARM.
Yeah.
Um, the thing that Apple does differently, even than Qualcomm, for example, and part of why they have such an advantage is that Apple segments out a lot of their hardware. It's not just like this ARM chip does everything. It's here's the ARM chip for general compute, but then we have this and this and this and this different separate microprocessor for all these different things.
Yeah.
And I don't think that ARM for server does that. And so it'll be
No,
really
they don't.
interesting to see how that translates. If obviously Apple's been making a big push for machine learning, for example. Well, what is their machine learning chip in Mac going to look like, and what applications will that bring, and how will that affect power?
Yeah, that's true, because they
Um,
are going to be doing it differently than the way Qualcomm would do it. That is
yeah,
a good
it's
point.
it's
Yeah.
a very unique situation where Apple is like essentially building like application specific compute devices into their chip at a whole bunch of them, and then having the
Right.
general compute ARM chip separate for the last thing it's needed. Because like even now on the Intel Macs, the T2 chip does H.264 encoding.
That's a good point. That's actually a really good point. And H.264 and H.265 on like iPad and stuff are
Hmm.
insane.
Yeah,
So it'll be
and they
interesting to
they
see that. In fact, it'll be interesting to see what a big interest of mine is going to be able to see like what things like Final Cut and stuff can do on ARM-based Macs.
mhm.
Like, what are they going to focus on? What are they going to specialize on that's going to make them good or bad? Because like right now, like even using GPU acceleration in DaVinci Resolve, editing X264 and H265 is like way worse of experience than using my Threadripper 3970X, because they just have so many damn cores, right? But
Mhm.
to have something specialized where like I was actually impressed with looking at X264 footage on my iPad, and editing on that, and like actually just scrubbing timeline and stuff like that, and being really impressed with the performance of it. It was not that far off of what my
Mhm.
3970X can do with that same kind of codec. And so it makes me wonder if high compression codecs and stuff for video work are going to be popularized a little bit more because of ARM desktops and laptops from Apple.
Yeah. And then the other thing is like it's going to be easier for Apple to implement uh what's the new codec that just got announced? Not HEVC, but the new
Oh, the new one, that's
H.266.
H266.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, which I
Um
can't remember the name for it. I'll look it up while you're talking.
yeah. Apple will be able to implement that much easier if they can implement like, oh, we're just going to upgrade our T3 chip and throw it in whatever next processor is available in that lineup.
Yeah, yeah.
Um
It's
and so like
versatile video coding, so it's VVC.
oh, yes.
Yeah.
So like there's a weird situation where Apple can throw things in sooner too, and it's going to really change that. And so it's like I just don't know how all of that's going to affect market share, because even when Qualcomm gets to better ARM chips for Windows,
Yeah.
the way that they currently build ARM chips is not like that. It's not
Yeah.
how Apple currently builds their ARM chips for
It is
mobile.
a very different implementation. And it's still, I have my questions about what Windows can do with ARM and whether or not it's ever going to be able to really be that good. because it's much easier for a company like Apple to rebuild their OS for ARM in specific than it is for somebody like Windows.
Especially since since Apple is much more willing still to give up on
Yeah,
previous
right, right.
stuff, whereas Microsoft used to do that. They used to force upgrades
Yeah, but not
to
as
use the
much.
new OS, but they don't even want to change the number version of Windows anymore.
Yeah. Well, of
And
course
so
we
like
have, like,
there's
1903, 2010, that kind of thing.
yeah, but I'm
But
talking like the core number. Like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Apple just went to iOS or to macOS 11. I honestly didn't think they were going to do that
Yeah,
ever,
yeah, I was kind of
and
having that. Yeah, yeah.
they did that. And Microsoft is saying, yeah, we're not leaving 10. So now Microsoft is where Apple was 5-10 years ago.
Yeah. It's an interesting idea. I don't know. And then of course there's the concerns that would come along with using Windows on ARM with security, because Microsoft already has a problem with security focus in some ways, and
Hmm.
obviously their platform is a lot harder to lock down than even that of Linux, and especially that of what Apple pushes out.
Hmm.
But it's like segmenting their security team even further, because they have to also focus on potential issues specific in the ARM version of Windows. That also scares me.
Yeah,
So
and
I
that's
don't
where
know.
it's like, unless they ever reached a future point of going the Apple Silicon route and saying we are abandoning x86, which I don't think they will do, at least not in the next decade.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Because
like, let's say,
x86 still has its advantages, of course.
yeah, let's say Apple proves extremely successful with Apple Silicon, which like
Yeah.
we're going way above what I think is actually going to happen. But let's say they claim 30% of the laptop and desktop market share. I don't
Hmm.
think that's
Hmm.
actually gonna happen. Let's say they do it. Microsoft is gonna have to make a fucking change if they are able to approach that point.
Yeah, that's true.
And if they're doing that because the iMacs and the Mac Minis are so much better performance to cost wise for most consumers. Obviously, for gaming, won't be, but for most
Yeah.
consumers that want a desktop for like editing or something, let's say they are able to achieve something that just isn't competitive, or that Windows can't compete with as well.
Hmm.
And then let's say for laptops, they are able to claw significant market share, and Microsoft has to make a big change, and they decide, okay, we have to abandon x86 in order to stay competitive and not lose even more market share.
Yeah, yeah.
That's gonna like they're gonna have to eventually, if Apple claims enough market share, whatever that hypothetical number is, they're gonna have to abandon x86, and what
Hmm.
happens then?
It's going to be an interesting situation because, I mean, obviously, ARM makes more sense for something that needs to be power efficient. I'm still very skeptical about the performance of what's going to be possible on an ARM-based desktop. Of course, though, some of that also though comes down to like Apple being able to focus on optimization for their software and their operating system. And the question becomes then, like, is it even viable for Microsoft to attempt to make that switch with Windows, or are they just not going to be able to because they have the same problem that Android has with optimization and efficiency, right? And so I
Well, I
guess,
think that's where it would. I mean, we're already seeing Microsoft though make different moves than Google,
yeah,
where like we don't really see Google work with Qualcomm to make chips. We are
true.
seeing Microsoft work with Qualcomm to make chips.
This is true.
Um,
Yeah,
Whereas like Google is looking at potentially making their own chips, so they're
yeah,
going the opposite route of Microsoft.
right.
Um,
It'll
and
be
I think that
interesting to
if
see. I
if
don't know.
Microsoft has a say in the chips that Qualcomm is making for the OS that Microsoft is developing,
Hmm.
while I don't think it would ever reach the point of integration that Apple is achieving,
It's still better than current.
yes.
I
Um,
guess, yeah.
Also, one thing I wanted to hit on with what you mentioned about how we've only ever seen like the ARM chips made for power efficiency.
Hmm.
Desktop is the one weird situation, whereas I feel like server and laptop both need power efficiency.
Yeah.
Desktop does not.
Oh
Desktop
yeah,
is not
yeah.
really where that, like, nobody that,
Nobody cares.
I mean,
Yeah.
businesses that are doing massive work obviously do care, but
Yes.
like, me in my place, I don't care that much about power efficiency. I care about like heat, but I don't care about like overall general just like power consumption.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I wonder what Apple could do, or any ARM chip maker could do with ARM. Like, is there a way to use ARM without giving a shit about power efficiency, where you could get some better performance out of it than people think?
To an
Or
extent, yes,
is it
but
not feasible? Nobody's ever attempted it, so we don't know.
yeah, but we understand the instruction sets, and the thing that makes x86 so inefficient in terms of power usage and stuff is because of the versatile instruction sets that it has. And you know that's the same thing with Windows, right? Where like Windows is still the most versatile operating system. You can do more with Windows 10 or Windows Server 2019 than you can with any other operating system. Period.
So
Linux people will yell, but what I mean is as a whole OS, you can do more with it than anything else, and
yeah.
x86 is a part of that.
So I get that part. What I'm getting at is like, so if we look at like Apple making custom chips with all their extra hardware for all the custom specific stuff they're doing on the side,
Mhm.
and if for an iMac or for a Mac Mini, they said as long as it doesn't overheat, we don't give a shit about power consumption.
Right, right.
What could they do with that is more so what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Could they achieve something where for the cost they can get way more performance by just saying fuck it to power efficiency and like um you know, if they can make a chip that runs at the same power efficiency as let's say 3700X,
Hmm.
what performance could they get out of that for
Yeah,
video editing? What performance could they get out of that for? I
I
don't
get what you're
think Apple's
saying.
ever
Yeah,
going to give a shit about gaming, but for gaming,
yeah.
like, are there ways that for the reasons that people buy Macs, they could get more performance out of that if they went fucking whole hog?
Right, right. I get what you're saying. Yeah, and I think that's something that we won't know for a while. But I mean,
Yeah,
we can take guesses at it. I guess is what I was
yeah.
saying. And
'Cause, like, desktop is just the one market for ARM we've
mhm.
never really seen an attempt at.
Right, right. And I guess what I was getting at was more so that the versatility of what x86 can do can't be topped by ARM. And so then it starts to become a question of, not whether or not like it'll be interesting to see the performance of what Apple's able to pull out of ARM on desktop
Yeah,
for sure, because
like,
they
does
know
that
what they're going to be
versatility
using. Yeah, like as a
does that
like
versatility matter is more so, I guess, what I'm
right. And I think for Windows it absolutely does, but for Mac, I mean, I have my Mac Mini, right? And like, say I had a much more powerful Mac. The only things that I feel like it's great for, other than obviously basics like music or web browsing, is pretty much like video editing and that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
There's so many things that I would just not want to or attempt to do on a Mac.
But that's more so just because macOS doesn't necessarily have those. It's not
Well,
like
that's what
a
I'm getting at though. Is Apple can focus everything on Mac because you just don't do as much with a Mac, and they can focus on doing this less things that you do, doing them really well, instead of trying to be compatible with everything on the planet, like
yeah.
Windows is, right? And I mean I mean both hardware and software, where Windows just can run anything. Um, so I don't know. I don't know. It's interesting. But speaking of Windows and mobile, like power efficient computers, um, I wanted to jump into the NUC unless you had more to add about Apple there.
No.
Okay, no. Uh, so interestingly enough, there is a NUC type competitor that is out from Asus powered by AMD. And this is interesting because we haven't seen this form factor very much with AMD, like ever. And this looks to be a pretty nice little unit. It's pretty impressive. So it's built around Ryzen 4000 Mobile, so it's built around their APUs that they're not calling it anymore. It's running Zen 2, though, obviously, so really great architecture there. And you can have it configured with the 4300U, the 4500U, 4700U, and 4800U. And those go 4-core 4-thread, 6-core 6-thread, 8-core 8-thread, and 8-core 16-thread, respectively. So you can get a really powerful machine in this NUC form factor. Of course, again, they're the mobile chips, so they're more efficient. They're not going to clock as high, and we don't really know how the performance in terms of like cooling is going to be on this thing, but it's still an interesting form factor. And then it's running the integrated GPU running Vega with 8 compute units, so that's the best that you can get on the APU style chips right now, and up to 64 gigs of RAM, which I was happy to see because a lot of times these smaller formats are only limited to 32 gigs, and I feel like 32 gigs is not enough for like a power user environment right now. Even me, like I have 32 gigs on my laptop, and when I'm using it for work, like I'm kind of mad that I only have 32.
Yeah. This is really cool. My thing though is like I'm gonna be much more interested in the second gen version of this when we have the next generation GPUs, which from everything that we have seen indicate to be a significant upgrade.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean,
Um,
Vega with 8 compute units is pretty good right now on a mobile form
yeah,
factor, but
but
of
I'm
course
just
it's
like,
still no 2070 Max Q or something.
yeah, and like from everything we know about consoles, which like the next gen consoles are our best indicator of what's coming in the next gen AMD GPUs
Yeah,
because they're using the next gen AMD GPUs just slightly modified.
yeah,
It seems like the architecture differences there are vast
they
and
are.
like very, very impactful.
Yeah,
And so like this is already a great product for like, basic compute and like the general like non-gaming Nook side of things.
yeah,
But like it would be really dope to have something that is as good for like the general compute stuff and like the multitasking and stuff as this that can also like game or render a bit better
yeah,
um
that's a good point.
than Vega can do. And like from what we've seen about that, like this is a great like starting point is essentially what I'm getting at. And I can't wait to see
Hmm.
how this from AMD evolves because I think it will over the next couple of years. Like it's already much better in my opinion than the Intel side.
Yeah, yeah.
I think within the next couple of years, it's just going to slaughter Intel Nooks.
I think so too. I mean, Intel hasn't proven to us that they can do anything. It's just been empty promises for some time now. And so that's why I get hesitant every time they say, "Oh, we're releasing this," and then of course I don't expect them to actually do it. And right now, like this being like kind of a first generation style thing, like I could still see this being extremely useful for like business and stuff, right? Because a
Mhm.
lot of businesses like Vega 8 or Vega with 8 compute units is plenty for
Yeah.
their types of workloads. And I mean, even businesses that are doing semi graphic style work, like this would be fine for doing like web development, photo work, that kind of stuff. Not necessarily video editing, although that would depend on
And not
what
necessarily like
resolution.
super
But
intense graphic design, but like if you're
yeah.
like in the context of like web development, for example, if you're just like you're working on like websites and so
Mhm.
you're like editing images to better fit the websites and stuff, like this would
Yeah.
be amazing for that.
And then the other thing, like, yeah, the only lacking part of this is the GPU. Like 8 cores, 64 gigs of RAM, like
Mhm.
that's more than even we use at my business for most users at the company I work at. I mean, and we do some work that requires a decent amount of processing power, but like this would be overkill for that. So it's pretty impressive to see that in such a small form factor. Again, I'm a little skeptical of the temperatures, but since they're mobile chips, they will hopefully do okay without being too noisy.
Yeah.
Which factors in another thing is I feel like what's important in NUCs and some of the laptops and stuff that I feel like some companies have lost, and in fact makes me really mad about like my Alienware, for example, is they will let chips overheat and downclock instead of just spinning the fans faster and being noisier.
Yeah.
And that bugs me a lot because if you can't get the control that say somebody like Apple's going to have where they can keep the temperatures down a bit and just lower the clock speeds without hitting that 100 degrees mark, which they do hit on some of their machines, but you get my point. Then I feel like the fan speeds just need to be increased. And like my Alienware, if it had fans that spun like 30% faster, I feel like it would be like very usable.
So, when it comes to these Nook-like devices, so the 4-core 4-thread and the 6-core 6-thread release September 7th.
Hmm.
In the UK, at least, we don't have US listings yet, but they release in the UK September 7th.
Okay.
And those two come with a 65-watt power supply, whereas
Okay. Is it
the 8
external? Did
core
they say?
does not say in this article.
Okay. I would hope it's
Um,
internal, but anyway.
the 8-core 8-thread and the 8-core 16-thread have 90-watt power supplies, and they
Mm,
are September 21st is when they release. And it ranges anywhere from 275 euros, which is about $360,
yeah.
to 500 euros, which is like 600 and something dollars,
Oh, okay.
$653, and that's before buying RAM and
Right, right,
like
yeah, because it's a
an
NUC. It's like
SSD
a
and
bare
stuff.
bones
Yeah,
system.
yeah. Now we
So,
don't know what that would translate to because sometimes with electronics, the pricing scales based on the dollar amount, differences. But
yeah,
sometimes it also is $275. Euro is also 275 US, and like
yeah,
Europe
yeah,
kind of gets screwed. So we'll see what that actual pricing for consumers outside of those that pay the euro. I mean, even if you live in the UK and you use pounds, like that might be very different pricing.
Right. Yeah.
So we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, yeah, it'll be interesting. And I guess what I was getting at with the fan speed is I hope I want to see companies, especially in the higher performance realm, look at increasing fan speeds to keep clock speeds up and keep performance in there. Because I guess the thought that goes through my head is like, this has an 8-core 16 thread, right? And like, if you can't keep an 8-core 16 thread cool enough to keep it under its thermal throttle point, then you shouldn't put an 8-core 16 thread in there.
So it does have a power brick.
Okay, that kind of sucks, but it's not too horrible. I feel like here's our tiny PC with a power brick the same size, is like a little annoying, but not too bad. Like Apple's done a good job with that actually with their MacBook Pro lineup and MacBook lineup, is having the power brick be actually decently compact, although it takes up a huge amount of space on your outlet, but still.
Yeah, and it's really hard to tell in this picture how big the power brick is relative to the device, because the device is like much further back. So it's like, I don't know if the power brick looks way smaller, but I don't know if that's just because of the placement and the scaling that they used for the photo, or if it's actually way smaller.
Yeah, right. So I don't know. Huh. Well, it'll be interesting to see what it's like. I mean, I have a certain interest in this from a business desktop standpoint. It seems like it could be really good. So kind of cool. So the next thing I wanted to jump into was the University of Arizona, which has just been awarded 5 years, $26 million grant. So $26 million over a 5-year period from the National Science Foundation to develop the quantum internet, as they're calling it, which really is just a quantum-based network, like a network that quantum computers can communicate over to, in a sense. Now it's been labeled the Center for Quantum Networks by the National Science Foundation, and they're partnering with MIT, Harvard, Yale, among some other places to start this. And what they're trying to compare this to is the original development of ARPANET, which was where the internet came from, hoping to like change the world the way the internet has. Now, I don't know. I'm very interested to see what comes of this, obviously, but like, comparing what you're trying to do to something that changed the world more than it knew it did is like, you're trying to say it will, which makes me more skeptical. You know what I mean, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, my thing when it comes to those types of claims is like, I don't know enough about, like, I know that quantum computing is not as useful from a widespread perspective as normal computing.
Yeah.
But who knows if the gains of quantum computing in the applications they are specific enough in will be of such significant gain that a quantum computing network will have those like compounding like beneficial effects that the ARPANET and then therefore the internet
that like impact on the world.
I in general will trust the foundation handing out money to build this network more than I will trust my judgment, because they know more about this than me. And it's not like National Science Foundation is going to convince people who don't like, they might get a little bit more funding for the foundation by saying we're doing this big deal thing.
Right.
But also like the people they have to convince to get the funding probably don't even know what fucking ARPANET is.
That's true. I guess what I'm saying is there's a certain part of me that feels a little weird when you try to say we are going to be as groundbreaking as this thing that nobody knew was going to be groundbreaking. It's kind of hard to like know how groundbreaking this product is going to be. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
but I mean, that
know.
doesn't, like, just because we didn't know ARPANET was going to be a big deal, or like this big of a deal, doesn't mean that like, now that we know, if what they know about quantum computing and its theoretical benefits, if they think that could be on par with what ARPANET ended up being, that is a fair comparison.
I guess so. Yeah.
It doesn't have to be as unexpected for it to be on par with ARPANET.
I guess so. Yeah. It just makes me feel like it obviously puts the skeptic. Yeah, I can't say it. It makes me skeptical because also, it's like it almost sounds like trying to say it's better than it is, but who knows?
Also, though, like if they were to say it's on par with the creation of the internet, that is, in my opinion, an even bigger scale claim
They
than
are trying to
ARPANET.
say it's going to have the same significance as the internet, though, too.
Yeah.
Like, they're trying to say, like it's going to change the world the way the internet has. But, of course, this was from engineering.arizona.edu is where I read about that. So,
Okay.
That's not from the NSF. That is from
Yeah.
Arizona University itself.
Okay.
So,
well, then, of course, they're going to try and claim because
Claim
they're
bigger,
the ones
yeah.
getting the grant. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're looking for, obviously they're wanting to get more grants, more money, that kind of stuff. But it'll be interesting, and it's cool to see that they are creating a Master of Science program in quantum computing. Now, that's something that I didn't even realize we don't really have yet, is like you can't really get a master's in quantum computing, so it's kind of
Yeah,
awesome
and I mean, it
to see
makes
that.
sense that you wouldn't have been able to because, like, there's only a few quantum computers in the world.
Yeah, like, to an extent it makes sense, but, like, it also would be nice. Like, it's just cool to see that we are getting degrees in quantum computing because, at this point in time, like, it feels like in some ways you don't have that paperwork credit for it in some ways, you know what I mean? So,
yeah,
I'm glad to see that, and it's useful for people that are, maybe wanting to get into that sort of thing. Like, maybe a younger me, for example, when I was considering colleges and stuff, would look at something like this and go, maybe I want to go to University of Arizona then, or one of these places that has the ability to do that.
If, let's say, this year you were graduating with your bachelor's in computer science, master's in quantum computing, the first year a degree is available, holy shit, is that valuable?
Yeah, absolutely. Or even if you're just coming out of high school and you're like, okay, now I know the direction I want to aim. And so, like, when they establish something like this, you can be like, okay, what prerequisites am I going to take at the colleges I'm currently living at before I graduate and move on to trying to get a master's at a place like
especially since probably 4 years from now there will be better quantum computing degrees.
Yeah, right, exactly. So it's pretty cool. I am glad this is happening, I guess is what I'll say. So I thought it was newsworthy because it's really interesting and I want to see more money dumped into innovative technologies, but also, can we figure out a good type of encryption so that it can't be broken?
Isn't there? I mean, there is some supposedly quantum resistant encryption.
Yeah, I mean, there's stuff being worked on.
I don't really trust it until there is quantum computing specifically focused on encryption to test it.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is, we have people, cryptographers, that are doing work on it, but it's like having to understand cryptography and quantum computing at the same time is a lot of work for one person, and so we need more people in the field to see, how available or how see what the possibilities are going to be.
Yeah, and also anyone that does anything on the internet that they're so concerned about, like, the government knowing, like, just realize that they're collecting a bunch of data to massively decrypt once quantum computing is viable.
Yeah, exactly.
Just know
so that. Yeah, like that's the goal they're going for. So whatever you're doing now that might be really bad and illegal, you're probably going to be caught in 20 years. So just keep it in mind.
Hey, just only do stuff that has a statute of limitations within a few years. You're good.
I don't think anybody doing that kind of stuff is doing that level of research. I'm sorry.
I mean, like, yeah, but like most crimes that you would commit on the internet, unless you're a child predator, at which point you can go fuck yourself.
Yeah,
but like if you're doing like financial crimes or whatever, like it's already it's like what most states it's like 7-year.
Yeah, that's true.
Statute of limitations.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, it's about that. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, that's a good point. So I actually just realized this maybe should have gone up ahead in this new section.
I had thought
here
about that earlier, but oh well.
Oh well. So some Qualcomm security issues that have been outed. So the first thing I will say is that there have been fixes worked on and they're being rolled out. But good luck to you Android users that get updates slowly. I hope that everybody with a Galaxy S7 is going to somehow get the updates for this. Now,
so if you're on a OnePlus or a Pixel, you're probably going to be a little better off.
Yes.
Everyone else, you're probably fucked.
So what this is, the second thing I'll say is they have not seen exploits in the wild, and they have not outed what these exploits are because obviously we know it's going to take a long time to patch this stuff. So they are not talking about how to do these exploits in any kind of detail, but they're saying that it does affect more than 40% of Android devices worldwide. And it's been dubbed Achilles. Now that means like the whole set of vulnerabilities has been dubbed Achilles, not one vulnerability. So it was like over 400 issues in their code, and it's been given a certain number of CVEs. I can't remember how many it is. It was like 7 or 8. Let me see here. I'm sure I can find it. It was a lot of CVEs. It was pretty sad. Did I not open the article? Let me open it up. So now, again, fixes have been implemented to an extent, but they haven't been able to, obviously actually push those out, and who knows how long it's going to take. And so the number of CVEs is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 CVEs dedicated to this. So that's not good. And like I said, no details, but it looks like these flaws could be used to eavesdrop on communications, crash phones, and execute arbitrary code.
Nice.
So yeah, that's bad. And luckily they haven't released any of this information, but that does make it hard to judge how difficult these are, right? Because like we have vulnerabilities like what's happened with Spectre and Meltdown back when those were around, and other types of vulnerabilities that are similar, where it's like sometimes the solution is worse, the cure is worse than the vulnerability, or the vulnerability is just so hard to implement that it's not that big of a deal. And as of right now, we don't really understand how challenging these are to do. So it could be that, okay, maybe of that 40%, only 10% are going to be patched, but like it's maybe not a big deal. But a lot of the people that have looked at it are saying it seems to be pretty bad. So yeah, and if it was that difficult,
it would also depend on
like
who has those phones. Like if like a government official has a phone, like they're obviously a much higher target.
Yes.
And that's where I feel like with a lot of security issues, things get kind of I don't want to say blown out of proportion, but just like, I guess blown out of proportion is what I'll say.
Yeah.
But like there's a lot of security issues that just like most people wouldn't be affected by, not because their hardware or software wouldn't be affected, but because like nobody gives a shit about your data, Karen.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's also a good point is, I mean, obviously things that could potentially lead to, theft of your social security number or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Are bad.
If you can mass execute code, then that's a concern. Like
but
if somebody can throw malicious code into, like if they can hack an Android app and throw malicious code in there, and then it's used by a widespread number of users that and like 10% of Android users all of a sudden had this malicious app, that would be a problem.
Yeah.
But if it's something that they have to be targeted on, then unless you're in a position where you would be targeted or could be targeted realistically, like it's not a concern. Like,
yeah,
I mean, even you would be of someone that is of more concern because you work in IT.
Yeah, that's true.
Whereas like me, like I'm a concierge at an apartment building. Nobody gives a shit about the data I have. Like they might give a shit about the data I have access to, but not the data on my phone.
Yeah.
And so it's like that's the type of thing where it's like 40% of Android users worldwide might be even down to a small handful, a few thousand people worldwide that it actually matters on. But those few thousand people, it could be a very, very big deal if it's easy to use.
Yeah, and of course, it's always good to, be as secure as possible, right? So, like,
yes,
by no means are we saying that, it's not something you should pay attention to, but, like, you don't necessarily need to panic or worry about it, right? Whereas, like, somebody that works in, IT, like me, for example, when there's a Windows vulnerability, like, there have been times where I have to, work extremely late at night to make sure something's patched because I have concerns,
Yeah, and when it's something like this where we don't know how to exploit it, it's of higher concern because if it is mass exploitable, then that's a very big deal.
Yes.
Whereas when we find out there are things that are, like, oh, you have to very specifically target a device.
Yeah, or have like physical access or Or some of the more recent vulnerabilities are like you have to have an already administrative rights, root privileges on a computer that's already compromised to execute this vulnerability to, cause even more problems. So
yeah.
It's the thing I will say is with a lot of the more recent vulnerabilities that we've seen, that code and not the code, but like the proof of concept gets released, and it gets released because it's something that's so hard to do that nobody's going to take the time or effort to do it anyway. So the fact that this hasn't been released makes me a little more concerned that it might actually be a little easier to do something widespread with it. Whereas like Spectre and Meltdown, there was a ton of stuff that was not patched with that, when it first got announced. And even the patches that first came around caused performance problems and in some cases didn't even fix the issue. And so, that was like, it's so hard to implement, nobody really worried about it anyway, right? But this maybe could be. So we'll just have to wait and see, I guess.
Yeah, them keeping this stuff secret is a little interesting.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean it's not that abnormal for like a 0-day type vulnerability, but um, it just seems like there's less information given this time than there has been with more recent stuff.
Who disclosed the vulnerability? Was it Qualcomm or was it?
This was disclosed by looking here. I think it was disclosed specifically by I'm looking. It was talked about at the virtual DEF CON hacking conference, which happens every year. It was just virtual this year for the first time for obvious reasons. Let's see. Outline this week. InfoSec experts at Checkpoint Research are the ones that talked about it.
Okay. The reason I ask, I don't know enough about them. Like, I know certain organizations, like, Google's, their team that does the like hunts for 0 days,
whatever it's called. Yeah, I forgot. Yeah,
like they have a specific policy
xLabs,
of,
I think. Yeah.
Yeah. No, not xLabs. xLab is the like
product
advanced
development.
research, product development team. But like Google's exploit team has a specific policy of releasing the details within a certain amount of time. And so if they made public a vulnerability but didn't release the details, that would be very concerning. Whereas I don't know Checkpoint Research, and so like it might be normal for them to disclose, hey, there is an issue, but
yeah, and they might be I mean, they're probably working with Qualcomm, saying, hey, we found these issues, they need to be fixed. We won't talk about how you can do them, though. We won't proof of concept it.
But I'm just saying, like, depending on the research team,
yeah,
whether or not they disclose how it works can be very different, and so I don't think that should necessarily be read into too much.
Yeah, it's just something I was pointing out. Yeah, because I mean, some teams it would be very abnormal for them to not release a proof of concept, and some the other way around. And I don't know much about Checkpoint Research either.
Like Google, for example, I think they give 90 days before they release it, no matter what, and that is to try and force them to get a fix out as fast as possible.
Yeah.
And so if Google ever said, hey, we know about this, it's been 6 months, that would be very, very concerning.
Yeah, absolutely.
If they didn't disclose how that worked. But Checkpoint, maybe that's just par for the course. Or maybe they're disclosing it to the public now and they have that 90-day policy, and 90 days from now we'll find out
what it was. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's interesting. It's very interesting, and I feel bad if it's bad. I feel bad for most Android users.
Well, no, 40%. That's not most.
Okay, you're right. That's a good point. I feel bad for most of the 40%.
Okay.
So this is one that you added in here that was interesting, and actually the site's yelling at me about ad blocking, even though I don't do full ad blocking, so I can't read it. So I'll let you talk about it.
Oh, yeah. So Amazon is apparently looking at taking over JCPenney and Sears locations within some malls to use as fulfillment centers. So specifically, they're in talks with Simon Property Group, which is the largest mall ownership group in the United States, to take over the closed locations of Sears and JCPenney's within those malls to use as fulfillment centers. So the idea being, malls are generally in pretty centralized locations.
Yeah.
And so if you're looking at setting up centralized fulfillment centers to get packages out quickly,
it kind of makes sense.
Malls are in a great location.
And they can even have a pickup area in the fulfillment center too, yeah.
Because they already have parking lots, they already have places to both park the vans and also park the cars for people looking to pick up.
Yeah.
However, this obviously is kind of counterintuitive to what malls look for in customers, and that malls want customers, and by malls want customers, they want businesses that draw in other customers, that draw people into their other businesses.
Well, that's the idea. So, you go to the mall, and even if you don't buy from those bigger businesses, you at least spend some money on food or whatever it may be.
Exactly, yeah. And so, like, that's where it's going to be interesting to see how malls develop going forward. Malls have to make a change. Retail is changing. You can say it's dying, you can say it's not. It's changing.
It's changing for sure.
And so we've seen certain things, like one of the smaller policies that I really liked from Andrew Yang was the American Mall Act, where he wanted to deal with the fact that dying malls hurt property values by making it so that malls aren't dying, but rather changing. And so the idea was, if a state wanted to turn a mall into a high school or turn a mall into a public space, they could get matching funds. That was his idea for policy. The idea is just make it so that the mall isn't a waste of space. It's not dying.
Yeah.
So we live in the Portland metro area. I'm not going to get too granular with where we live, but we live in the Portland metro area, and there's Mall 205. Now, I don't know if you've been there recently, but it's depressing.
I have. It's really sad.
Like,
yeah.
Like, if you go to Mall 205, for anyone that lives in the area, you probably go to Target or Home Depot, and you don't go into the mall. If you go into the mall, like, the food court has like one restaurant open, and the rest of it is closed. It's terrifying.
Scary. Yeah, it's really sad.
And if that was thriving in any way, even if it was like, oh, we've taken out all the restaurants and it's now like an indoor park or some bullshit, like, that would be better for property value because it would get used. And so even if Amazon just turns these into fulfillment centers, it's better for the area, I guess, but it doesn't help the rest of the stuff in the mall.
Yeah.
And so, like, I think that this might work better in areas where the malls are transitioning and they don't need the other traffic. Again, using a local example, Mall 12, or not Mall 12, Lloyd Center Mall, which is not owned by Simon Property Group. It's owned by a different property group. I looked it up. But that one is transitioning to be more entertainment focused. And so they're setting up a concert hall with Live Nation. And that concert venue is going to have a bar on a different floor, that type of stuff. And so they're more so focused on like live entertainment. Is how they're trying to set up that mall. And so if the opposite end of the mall has an Amazon fulfillment center, that's not going to hurt it.
Yeah, no, not at all.
It's not going to help, but it's not going to hurt it. And that's, I think, what they need. Whereas, you know, if you're a normal mall and all of a sudden an Amazon fulfillment center opens up, that might actually hurt the small businesses and the retail in there.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
You know, GameStop losing sales to Amazon because Amazon can now deliver within 2 hours much easier.
Yeah,
would be bad for the mall, but Amazon is not competing with a concert venue.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
I'm sure they'll try to.
I mean, they're going to try and compete with absolutely everything, of course. It's kind of disgusting. But, well, I mean, I wouldn't even say kind of. It's just disgusting. But, interesting. Yeah, I mean, Amazon taking over everything does worry me. And Amazon being in more places worries me. But I can see the business strategy behind it. And I can see, you know, don't want to waste that space either way, right? So
yeah, like, the way I see it, it's worse to have nothing there than to have Amazon there, but it'd be better to have just about anything else there than Amazon.
Yeah, agreed. Oh boy. Well, I think now it is definitely time to move into tiny news.
We've got 3 tiny news topics for you today.
3 tiny news topics, although one of them is actually kind of huge. It's just quick. So Toshiba is out of the laptop business officially. Like, they are done. Like, they sold off their laptop business to Sharp.
For reference, they were already almost completely out. They had already sold 80.1% of their laptop business to Sharp.
Yes.
They were effectively not in it.
I think they were basically just keeping the branding of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then per that original agreement, when they had sold that, Sharp had the option to buy the remaining 19.1%, and they executed that in June. So now the branding is just Dynabook. You're not going to see like Sharp on laptops, I believe. It's just going to eventually just be Dynabook.
Interesting. I don't know if I like that name.
Yeah, it's a kind of weird name.
It's a really weird name, but yeah.
Which is funny, because I actually, like, if I saw Sharp, I'd be more likely to buy it than Dynabook, because, like, the only issue I have with Sharp is that their products just aren't available. Like, Sharp's TVs were fucking great. They were the first ones to use, like, 4-color pixels.
Yeah. No,
they did a good job with that. Stuff, Sharp's phones that they sold on Sprint were the first ones to be nearly bezel-less on 3 ends.
Yeah.
They were fantastic. Like,
and Sharp they developed IGZO.
Yeah,
which is like a great technology that's still not used in very many things. Exactly kind of what you're saying. Yeah,
I know. And in fact, there was the thing that I was most excited to see from IGZO and Sharp was actually a Nintendo product. There was rumors a long time ago, and in fact some patents, where Nintendo had apparently patented some very odd-shaped devices that were only achievable with IGZO. Because for those that don't know, besides folding OLEDs, there's not any other really like panel types that you can get like
Transparency, right? And stuff.
as unique
Or
of shapes as IGZO.
oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah, yeah. You
Remember,
could,
there was
yeah,
some like weird, like oval and like really odd shapes that you just couldn't do because of the controller for any other panel.
yeah, yeah,
OLED you could do by having it like bend. Like that's how iPhone and some of these other phones get the really, really small bottom bezel, is by literally bending the display under.
yeah. And then they put the yeah, yeah, exactly.
But however they did it, I haven't looked into IGZO enough, but like IGZO could just get whatever shape they wanted pretty much.
That's interesting. Yeah. So it's kind of odd to see like there's been a lack of their products, but and then I don't know why they're relabeling these Dynabook either. I agree that Sharp would make more sense.
Yeah.
It's odd. Huh.
I wonder if Sharp just wants to be a behind the scenes brand.
Maybe? I don't know.
That
But
way,
they
like
could do
any
better than
failures don't
Dynabook.
represent. Yeah, but I agree with that. But Dynabook is already, I think, already an existing brand under Toshiba.
Yeah, yeah, I believe
And
so.
so I think they're just using that while getting rid of the Toshiba name.
Yeah,
Whereas I think that what Sharp is going for is any product failures don't represent Sharp. They represent that product's failures.
yeah, right. I guess so.
Which
Interesting.
is good for investors, not really all that helpful for consumers, but consumers don't really notice.
Yeah, true. Huh. So the next bit of tiny news that I wanted to mention was Modern Warfare for PC is now over 200 gigabytes, 242 gigabytes after it's uncompressed, from my understanding, or around that range. So that's just insane. And now, of course, this is the entire game when you have, obviously, like this is the campaign, this is Warzone, this is multiplayer, this is everything, but that's still
Can you install
massive.
them separately though? Because when I
No,
tried to
no.
install Warzone before, you had to install the whole thing.
Yeah, no, it's still installing the whole thing. What I meant was just that this isn't just the size of Warzone. This is everything. But yeah, it's a single game install, and it's just ridiculous to be that massive. But at the same time, like this goes along with some of the things that I've talked about in like the past a long time ago was, talking about SSDs being the primary thing now for storage. But it's like, with games being this massive, it's still expensive to have an SSD. Say you wanted to play 3 games that were this big, like a 1 terabyte SSD is almost not cutting it. So it's still expensive to have that over like an 8 terabyte hard drive for the same price.
Yeah. So I had a conversation with somebody else the other day about this, where
Yeah.
not about the file size in total, but about the updates. Where
Yeah.
I'm wondering if it's that Call of Duty's chunk sizes for the way that they chunk out their game is too big with their new engine, and that they have duplicate files on too many chunks, and it's essentially causing everything to be bigger. Because like you should not have 70 gigabyte or 50 gigabyte updates.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. They've been massive.
But you have to update the entirety of any given chunk, and so with the relatively small changes to, for example, Warzone, having a 50 gigabyte update sounds pretty insane, but if their chunks are bigger than most games for whatever reason, the way that their engine does it, the way that they achieve their performance, who knows what it is.
Yeah.
But whatever that reason being, if the chunks are too large and they have duplicate files in those chunks, that could be creating a big problem. And I think that, I wonder if of all of the games that we'll see get a file size reduction once they can release for SSD only, which I think Call of Duty will be one of the later games to do that, because they try and sell to everyone as much as possible, and I think that on PC they'll hold out on hard drive longer.
Yeah, probably.
But once they do go full SSD optimization, I wonder if we're going to see like vast storage requirement shrinks.
We might,
because they don't need to duplicate stuff. Because like I mean, I haven't played Warzone enough to know if there's like duplicate assets being used.
Not as many as you would think. So that is also probably inherently an issue to an extent. There is, there are definitely duplicates, of course, but I mean, like, there's a lot of uniqueness to it too. Like the map is pretty damn unique everywhere you go, which is impressive. Back when I was playing it before I was 100% anti-Activision, but
Yeah. Also, though, like, do we know how big their audio is? 'Cause, like, do you remember
Titanfall.
Titanfall? Yeah, where it was like a 50
Yeah.
something gig game, but it was like 34 gigs audio.
Yeah, I don't know how much of it's audio. I do know that during the installation, I don't remember seeing a long uncompression time for audio or anything like that. That like Titanfall, right, when you installed it, like it did have
Yeah,
an
but it
uncompression
told you
setting.
that. It's also entirely possible
Yeah,
that Call
that
of
it's
Duty
just
just doesn't
happening.
specify.
Yeah, that's
Um,
true.
the other thing that this makes me curious about is the next Call of Duty, because we've seen Activision
Mm-hmm.
claim, or not claim, but like confirm that the next Call of Duty will be deeply integrated into Warzone, which,
Yeah,
for
yeah,
one, obviously tells us that it's using the same engine.
yeah. Because
Because you
Warzone's
can't deeply
basically gonna
integrate
be
into.
for all the games, I believe, is what they announced, right? Like it's gonna
Yeah,
be
but
like the same Warzone.
the issue is if it's the same Warzone,
Yeah.
how do you, and you have to have Modern Warfare to install Warzone now. How do you install just the next Call of Duty and Warzone?
Either using, well, I guess that would depend if so they're requiring Modern Warfare install right now, but is that because of duplicate assets or just because they're stupid? Because neither one is
I know, even if it's duplicate assets, it's because they're stupid. Because you'd think that if you just wanted to play Warzone,
mm-hmm.
which a lot of people probably do because it's free to play,
Yeah.
it would be better for Activision, especially
Yeah.
since their game is not. If their game was just on Steam, I could see them not giving two shits because it's Steam's servers
Yeah.
and it's Microsoft and Sony's servers,
Yeah.
but it's on the Blizzard launcher, which
Yeah,
means
that's
it's
true.
their servers, which means if they could reduce the game 50, 100 gigabytes, 150 gigabytes by just
Mm-hmm.
having Warzone as a standalone asset, that's a lot of bandwidth to force people to download for no reason.
It's true. It's true. And I don't know. It just makes me feel weird because we have ISPs being so predatory and having, data limits. And then I feel like we're seeing games get this big, right? Like this is
I mean,
blowing through.
this is a unique situation though, because like the other
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
super big game that some people will talk about on PC and on console is Red Dead Redemption 2, and that's like
Mm-hmm.
barely over 100 last I checked.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
I
this is
I
a
don't
very
think
big
there's
exception.
anything that compares to Modern Warfare.
Yeah. Games are getting bigger and bigger though. I mean, even like Doom Eternal is 50 gigs for its install size, right? And Doom
That's
Eternal,
pretty
like
common though now.
that's not uncommon, but Doom Eternal's not like a like there's unique levels and stuff, of course, but like it's a short game, relatively speaking. It's an extraordinarily replayable game, but it's not the scale that something like Call of Duty, World of Warcraft, Fortnite, that kind of stuff is,
I mean,
So
Fortnite's not that big, but
well, Fortnite install size is like 40 gigs now, I think. And so like my point is that games are just getting bigger too.
yeah. Well, that again, that I understand, but like
56 gigs.
Call of Duty shouldn't be like you know 100 gigabytes after install larger than Red Dead Redemption 2.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, well, I don't know. I have mixed feelings. Like you said, you haven't really played Warzone. Like, it is impressive how unique it is. There is a
No, I get that
lot of
part.
unique assets and stuff. So
Red
there's a
Dead
lot of
Redemption
texture to download.
2 is a huge map with multiple different cities and a lot
Yeah,
of other stuff going on, and fucking textured horse balls.
yeah. This is a good point. Yeah, so I don't know.
Like
It
that
seems
alone
like
probably
something
takes
is
up 50
wrong.
gigs.
Yeah, right. So I don't know. I mean, it's I don't know. I can see part of why it might be a thing, but also like it feels like there's something wrong here too. Yeah. It feels like there's something going on that doesn't need to be.
Yeah.
And then our last topic of the night was something you wanted to mention.
Yes. So depending on when this gets uploaded, because you said you might have it uploaded tomorrow, the 10th.
That's my goal.
If that's the case, then the same day that this is getting uploaded, Night City Wire 2 will be premiering, which is the new like Cyberpunk updates.
Yep.
So we potentially will have more Cyberpunk news by the time we record the next full episode.
Which also, if we decide, I mean, if this news launches tomorrow and we record our WordCast 78.5,
that'll be a more like focused episode, though. I feel like.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good point. So it'll probably be next week.
Yeah.
So that is, but we we may have one more episode of WordCast 78 this week too. So keep an eye out. That might be happening.
Yeah.
Depending on time, since I have to stay up all night tonight.
Have fun with that. I'm going to bed soon.
Yeah, I know you are. I'm gonna go play games, and I'm gonna work on editing this, of course, too. So
Yeah.
well, thank you everybody for watching. That was WordCast number 78. I hope everybody enjoyed, and as usual, like, subscribe, leave a comment. Check us out on your favorite podcasting app as well. You can obviously also tweet at us and stuff like that if you are running on a different podcasting app, because I would be very interested to hear from people that are listening to this not on YouTube, but potentially on another platform. Of course, I want to hear from all of you on YouTube as well. But if you do want to tweet at us from another podcasting app, it is at WordTech Reviews. So that's the Twitter handle, so you can tweet at us. I check that very frequently. So feel free to reach out to us. And for those of you that maybe watched these in the parts and stuff too, let us know what you think of that, because I know sometimes these podcasts, this one was just 2 hours, but sometimes they're very long, so we release them in segments, and so far the feedback's been good, but interested to hear from more people. So kind of an early hint, but big changes coming. We've got a new logo in the works, so fun for those of you that have been following for a while.
About time.
I know it's been a long time, but yeah, we're gonna be working on a new logo and a new color scheme, so it should be interesting. So keep an eye out for those changes. Anything else to add, Daniel?
Not really.
Alrighty. Well, I hope everybody has a good day, night, morning, whatever it may be, and thank you all for watching or listening.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.